some crucial reports here. So we'll move on. I've got apologies from Keith Garforth, and I know Kath Scott will be a little bit delayed, but she will be on a little bit later. Have we got any more, Karen?
Yes, I've just got one through for Mrs. Graham.
Right, yeah. I will be saying a bit more about Monica at the next meeting. Okay, so I'll obviously say something then. Right, are there any declarations of interest? There's no urgent items, so can we go on to agenda item 5, please, which is the Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report 2019-2020. The report you'll find is at agenda page 5 onwards. It says the Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and it's the first annual report since its establishment in September 2019. It sets out the partnership's work over the past year and outlines future priorities. And I must say, even before we started, this was an excellent report, and thank you very much. It was a very readable and very user-friendly report. So on that basis, I shall welcome Jonathan Giordano, who is the Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Partnership Manager, to present his report. Okay, and then obviously that will be followed by any sort of comments or questions. So Jonathan, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for inviting me this morning to present, as Councillor Jones has alluded to, Wakefield Safeguarding Children Partnerships Inaugural Annual Report. The cycle for the report is September 2019 through to August 2020, given that was when the partnership was established, and it provides then that yearly cycle. So if I may provide a recap on who the Safeguarding Children Partnership is, you will find that is detailed within Appendix 1 on page 37, and specifically around how the partnership functions. The partnership is a shared responsibility of the 3 statutory partners, that being the local authority, the CCG and West Yorkshire Police, alongside relevant agencies including education, to ensure that multi-agency safeguarding arrangements in Wakefield are in place, are fit for purpose, and ultimately promote the welfare of all children in the district to ensure they are effectively safeguarded. The partnership is now supported by an independent scrutineer, who is Stuart Smith, and Stuart provides challenge and scrutiny to the work that the partnership carries out. So the governance structure on page 37 provides an illustration. So we have a Safeguarding Partnership Executive. The primary role of the executive is to set out the strategic priorities, and that group has oversight for all of the work of the 5 subcommittees that are detailed beneath that chart, and it acts mainly as a decision-making body, and also has the overall function in relation to quality assurance. The 5 subcommittees are as follows. So we have a Child Safeguarding Practice Review Group. The responsibility of that group is twofold. One is to carry out rapid reviews following the death or serious injury to a child where abuse or neglect is suspected, and to ascertain if a local or national learning review is required. The second element is then to ensure that those actions from the reviews are implemented and lead to systems and practice changes where required. We have a child death overview panel, and that considers all expected and sudden deaths of children in Wakefield, analysing what the term modifiable factors to identify any future learning that can impact on practice. We have a multi-agency child exploitation group, which has oversight for all the work across the partnership in tackling, disrupting and preventing child exploitation. A learning and development subgroup is the training arm of the partnership, and that has responsibility for developing and delivering multi-agency safeguarding training and coordinating safeguarding conferences. And last but not least, on that structure on page 37 is the Safeguarding Effectiveness Group, and that is responsible for scrutinising the performance of considering data sets and multi-agency audit. So you'll find on pages 3 through to 6, that really sets the context and the scene in terms of an introduction to the partnership from the three statutory partner leads, which is Beata Wagner, Mark McManus and Susanna Cookson. And on page 3 we have a foreword by Stuart Smith, and Stuart pulls out some of the key areas of focus the partnership has delivered against throughout this year. And like with pretty much everyday life, that has been determined by the pandemic since March time. And Overview and Scrutiny did receive a presentation in November around the work that the partnership has coordinated in respect of ensuring that vulnerable children and families are safeguarded and cited. Stuart alludes to that within his foreword, and also discusses and outlines the approach in which we adapted to learning development to enable professionals to maintain access and training to aid their practice development. Some of the other focuses that Stuart alludes to is around the multi-agency audit work and learning reviews in relation to serious incidents involving children, and they've been carried out, which have produced recommendations to evolve systems and practice, and I will go into slightly more detail on those shortly. The core data set of the partnership has seen a big improvement in this past 12 months. It's set out more robustly, which enables a deeper analysis on various indicators to seek assurance that safeguarding systems are working to safeguard children. Specifically, we now have inclusion of mental health data and police disruption activity around child exploitation. And we've also sought local assurance in respect of national reviews into child exploitation through the multi-agency child exploitation group, which has in turn strengthened the awareness of child exploitation across services who work with children, and also then developed a really robust system to deliver interventions to disrupt and prevent abuse taking place. Additionally, that has raised the need to identify services' understanding of what intelligence is and how that can be shared with the police to further enhance that disruption and prevention arm around child exploitation. So some of the key highlights I will just run you through with the report, and then I'll be happy to take comment and any questions. So firstly, around the Child Death Overview Panel, the CDOP, as it's abbreviated, underwent a transformation, and it's partnered with our neighbours in Kirklees to include North Kirklees as part of the Mid Yorkshire local area footprint. And within this cycle, it considered 20 deaths. Specifically, 6 of those deaths were unexpected stroke sudden, and 4 of those were related to co-sleeping stroke unsafe sleeping practices. Now, when you look at that breakdown, thankfully we are dealing with very low numbers, but I'm sure all on the committee will agree that one sudden death of a child is one too many. So therefore that is a high percentage breakdown within the theme around co-sleeping. So what we've done in Wakefield as partners is coordinating a multidisciplinary working group, and that working group has provided some significant developments and produced a safe sleeping standard, and also commissioned training through the Lullaby Trust to support and upskill all services who work with children and families to be able to identify the signs of unsafe sleeping and have conversations with family about safe sleeping. So for example, where historically that has sat predominantly with health services, so the likes of health visitors, GPs, what we've determined in Wakefield is, well, when we perhaps have police officers attending houses, fire, voluntary sector organisations, social workers, we want those professionals to have that skill set whereby they are then able to have those conversations with families about safe sleeping. In terms of audit activity, we've carried out a number of different audits in this cycle. The big overarching audit that we carried out in the summer was the Section 11, and the Section 11 is an audit all agencies named under the Children Act 2004 carry out as having a statutory duty to safeguard children, and we carried out 2 multi-agency case audits in relation to neglect and mental health. So the Section 11, as you will find detailed on page 16, was completed by 12 agencies, they assess themselves in relation to the 9 requirements also detailed on page 16 lower down. So just to give you a summary of what safeguarding array look like thematically across those services, that is detailed within the report on 16 and across onto page 17. So in terms of working well, there's a strong commitment to safeguard from agencies through plans, policies and procedures. Agencies reported that they have an understanding of their role in relation to safeguarding and have access to support. Children are engaged in assessment processes and have arrangements in place to listen to and act upon the views of children. And there's good compliance in relation to information sharing. Thematically, where we've highlighted there are some areas to develop, is that where services were identifying that training is still a need, what they were identifying against was that they need to carry out training that provides their staff with a local understanding of the Wakefield safeguarding arrangement. So very much looking at developing their training offer alongside the Safeguarding Children Partnership, as opposed to looking at national training to provide that local context. There was some barriers with some services around access to safer recruitment training, and also with one specific service to ensure that their local safeguarding policy reflects up-to-date national legislation, which has now been completed. It's an old age theme that we are managing at this moment in time and looking to develop, but it's a huge piece of work is around the transitional provision arrangements for children entering adulthood. The mental health and neglect multi-agency audits were specific for services involvement with children and families as part of that cohort, so it was more of a deep dive audit activity. Again, just to feedback on some of the findings that is listed on page 18 onwards, working well. What we found within those cohort of cases at schools demonstrated clear involvement in multi-agency planning. Staff have an understanding of their role in safeguarding and having access to support. Children were identified, had a lead practitioner within school who coordinated effective response to a child's safety plan and support. Where we found some areas for development was where we have made some really good strides actually latterly towards the back end of 2020, where some services were not routinely involved in assessment planning for children, namely some what we will class as scarce health services, so the likes of GP practices. And in a couple of the cases, we found that that even where GPs had some rare involvement with a child, they were not requested to contribute to an assessment. And just to articulate that further, that routine contact with school nursing services as part of the section 47, the assessment process that social care carry out, was not always apparent, although it was noted that health information had been shared as part of the strategy discussions. So what that, just around a couple of those areas there, that has been taken to the Safeguarding Effectiveness group. And what we've found since is that we've now got a real strength in attendance from health agencies that has been hitting the 100% attendance mark, which is where we would expect it to be at. And also where we have found through a separate audit that social care and the CCG have carried out is to ensure that social care is sharing minutes for GP practices, and then those GP practices are recording those minutes appropriately. So that has been some really good systems work that's been developed out of those audits. In terms of moving us on to the multi-agency child exploitation group, that has come on leaps and bounds in the past year. So the partnership's first children vulnerable to exploitation profile was developed, and that utilised a range of data sources, identifying key areas to focus resources on. What we found pre-March, pre the pandemic, was that there was a need to carry out work in relation to Wakefield bus station. That was identified as a risk area in relation to child exploitation, but also around antisocial behaviour and low-level criminality as well. So what we've seen that's come from that exploitation profile was that youth services carried out joint working with voluntary sector organisations, with police colleagues. That was commissioned through the MACE group and provided targeted interventions to groups of young people, but also raised awareness of child exploitation to bus station staff, to the public. So for example, if you you had a child in a school time that was out of school, around the bus station, be thinking that could potentially be an indicator that child is missing, either from home or from school, and then relaying that those messages can be then indicators around child exploitation. What we've seen as well is the strength of the co-location of police and local authority services. That's continued to positively impact on service provision. So what has been well established for some time now is risk assessment meetings for children that are at risk of child exploitation, that looks then to source partners to provide a range of information and agree appropriate interventions to reduce that risk. But what has also developed since is a separate perpetrator risk assessment meeting, which has taken the burden and the myth really that disruption around perpetrators is only a police responsibility. It's for all services to have a responsibility around disruption. So that again has taken the same learning from the young person's risk assessment meeting and provided services with a shared responsibility to develop tactics to disrupt, and then ultimately for the police to convict those seeking to exploit. Where we've identified future work within MACE is very much around those children who are not attending school. That has always been a factor, but I think the pandemic has very much amplified that. So when we're looking at children missing from education and also children that are electively home educated, how are we ensuring that the child exploitation risks of those children is being articulated in a manner that services are able to understand that and then be able to identify those children that will benefit from further assessment. And also linked in with the pandemic is very much the online risk posed to children, given that more time is being spent online due to COVID-19. What we are looking to develop into later on this summertime is to run a campaign to promote what intelligence sharing is to West Yorkshire Police and how it can be shared as a means to disrupt. So what we've got with West Yorkshire Police is something called a Partnership Intelligence Portal. Within Wakefield, our numbers have been low in comparison to regional neighbours, and we are wanting to really stress the importance of sharing that intelligence with police to help them then piece together around that disruption and that perpetrator activity. If I can move us on to some of the work around learning and improvement, which is detailed on page 22. So just around some of the practice reviews that we carried out, and you'll see noted that we carried out 5 reviews during this time frame. Where a serious incident involving a child has taken place. I think that the review that I would really just like to stress and elaborate on is the significant piece of work that the Child Safeguarding Practice Review Group has carried out in implementing the learning from a cluster of apparent suicides of young people in 2018. Due to the complexity and circumstances and the time in undertaking the review, the learning was progressed during this cycle. So the work has really taken place significantly across pretty much all services that are involved with children, from social care to the child and adolescent mental health service, to voluntary sector organisations, to education, to public health, to health visiting services. But I think in relation to the 4 children who took their own life in 2018 was the developments around post-16 establishments. So what we've really developed alongside our colleagues in the post-16 sector is now processes around consistent and clear communication that colleges provide to parents and carers around if a child has got a prolonged absence from college and they're not being seen. There's a clear procedure now for leaving college to include communication to parents and carers and a further offer of support. Health enrolment forms now include a section for mental health. There's a common protocol now in place for sharing of information between schools and colleges. There's clear guidance in place to state that mental health concerns should always be shared with a parent and carer as a default policy, really stressing that a person who is 16, 17 is still a child, and therefore we still need to respond as we would in terms of a safeguarding response if that child was 13, 14. So very much looking at creating that element around that just because a child has left school doesn't mean that they should be met with a different safeguarding intervention. A death of a child policy is now in place as well in colleges, which includes a suicide and death in the community, as well as a structure of immediate response and support. So very much looking at the broader impact of a child taking their own life within a college setting, within a school setting, as well as clearly within a family setting as well. And additional training has been made available for education professionals relating to self-harm and suicide ideation. Moving on to learning and development. So this was stressed at the ONS in the presentation that I provided in November around the Safeguarding is Everyone business campaign. So just as a very quick recap, it is detailed on page 23 and 24 that campaign was launched when the first lockdown was introduced, and that very much looked at promoting messages with those communities, professionals that wouldn't ordinarily be responsible around safeguarding. So very much looking at emphasising the message that safeguarding is everyone's business. We produced posters, leaflets, social media graphics that we are still continuing to use currently. And the three strands of that was around ownership. So everyone's seeing safeguarding as part of their community responsibility, spotting, understanding the increased potential for harm, and then being able to report as well. In terms of broader learning, so we developed an extensive range of virtual and remote learning opportunities to maintain that support for professionals during the pandemic. And what we found is the reach of conferences or training has extended far beyond the engagement ordinarily that the multi-agency offer normally receives. There is a section that is very detailed on the impacts of what the partnership did during COVID-19. It continues to. I suggest that I don't go into too much detail, given that the report very much just reinforces within that section detail on page 32 what was presented at ONS in November. And just to finish off, so some of the next steps are described on page 34 rather. In terms of that we are developing direct survey user involvement with children and families, so linking in with our youth engagement forums, because we feel as though that we have a really good linking with professionals and services, but actually we need to directly engage more with children and families. We are wanting to broaden our approaches to communicating developments within the safeguarding children field to service workforces more effectively. So we are looking at producing a monthly safeguarding children e-bulletin that anybody can sign up to, and it will give the person who receives that all the necessary up-to-date information around safeguarding. We need to increase our own generated activity to highlight safeguarding development. So for example, around our own policies, procedures, 1-minute guides, to ensure that those guidances are readily accessible for frontline professionals, and we're steering away from having guidance that is 20, 25, 30 pages long, because that in the grand scheme of things isn't a practical tool that services on the front line are able to utilise efficiently. We are looking to develop further relationships, and this is something we have progressed recently with colleagues in the Safeguarding Adults Board and Community Safety Partnership, with a focus on those transitional arrangements between children and adult services. We need to consider the workforce development needs in light of Wakefield Families Together and the impact upon multi-agency practice. And we also need to develop a quality assurance and learning improvement framework that very much links in the multi-agency learning that we provide alongside the quality assurance, just to make sure that is linked up more strongly, whereby then we have findings from reviews, from audits. How does that directly inform the training, the learning that we produce as a partnership, and how do we make sure that is landing directly to frontline professionals? And lastly, we are reviewing and establishing the Wakefield child death process. So that is including the child death overview panel that I alluded to before, but around introducing the compliance around a child death review meeting for all children who have passed away. So not just around those who have passed away suddenly, but all of those children who have passed away expectedly as well. So apologies to finish on quite a morbid note, but I'll take a pause there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any comment or any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your detailed report. As I say, I think as said before, the report is very readable and very accessible, and I think it gives a very good overview of how progress has been made. And I'd also like to draw attention as well to the website with regards to the information that is on there about safeguarding. So, I think certainly there's distinct progress. I'll go to Kevin first if he wishes to ask a question, and I'll come up at the end. Thank you. Over to you, Kevin.
Two questions, Chair. One quite specific and one rather general. The specific one concerns the references to the 2018 suicides of young people. A particular interest because that they were concentrated in and adjacent to the ward that I represent. Now, obviously at the time, queries that we put forward were mainly met by the point that the whole thing had to be very, very confidential. But now that kind of most of the consideration and the rest of it has been followed through, is there any kind of summary information and conclusions and so forth that is able to be passed on to elected members?
Certainly, Councillor Swift. Yep. So there is a summary report that was published in December. So I will make sure that is accessible for the committee, and that is a public document that can be shared.
Thank you. But the more general question was that one issue that was missing both from the report and from the presentation was that there was no reference whatever to either costs or expenditure. How much does the safeguarding partnership cost?
So in terms of a total cost, it's a joint pool between the local authority, the CCG, and West Yorkshire Police. The budget approximately, Councillor Swift, for this year was just over £300,000. So that is a pooled budget that provides absolutely everything in terms of all the staffing structure of the business unit, to then the development of all the training offer that services provide, alongside all the work that we produce through the governance structure in terms of the subcommittees and the executive.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's in support really of one of Kevin's questions on the summary report. As you probably know, Chair, our ward abuts onto Wakefield bus station, and I, over the last few years, reported on many occasions antisocial behaviour by young people and other things to do with drugs and. Now then, my comment is, all this information is going back to partners such as the police and other people, but elected members aren't getting feedback from the reports that are going in. So I think that there's a breakdown in communication where these questions should be answered and the answers given to the local elected members. We don't seem to be getting the information back on what is happening within our wards, or parts of those wards, I should say. And the other one was, of course, the summary report. I would welcome that. Probably we'll get some information of that. For an example, we don't get partners on virtual meetings. The Police and Crime Panel, as the Chief Constable for West Yorkshire and the Police and Crime Commissioner, that is a meeting where we get information back from the police, but above the rank of sergeant, in PAC meetings, we never see an inspector, and we never get reports back on what's happening to the young people within our wards. So that is my comment, is really information feeding back to elected members from the police and other parties. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Stuart. Celia, comment?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic report, and so much of in it, which is very positive. Thanks very much, Jonathan. It's just a comment really on the forward, actually, and it talks about the online sort of community that's being created at the moment, which is a great thing because it tightens up the whole system. But one of the things that concerns me just a little bit is the feeling that this is going to replace, in a sense, those normal sorts of meetings that social workers have and other practitioners, where there's a lot of face-to-face contact. And I'd like to have some reassurance, really, that learning is not just to be done online. It's not. They're going to be events bringing people together, and that includes practitioners from other areas. So I'd like that kind of reassurance, and also the feeling that we must never lose the sense of having to work together as a team in each other's presence, so to speak. So just wondered what comment you could make about that. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you. Yep. So certainly, I would support that view, Celia, that what we envisage moving forward, and we are really chomping at the bit to be able to roll out face-to-face training. Certainly, we are not looking to replace what was our traditional offer around learning and development with a solely online offer. I think where we found some real benefits is around the accessibility, the pre-recorded element for when professionals are unable to get to a location, they're then able to access that directly from the website. But there are specific trainings that we've just not been able to virtualise. For example, mental health first aid training, because of the nature of the content of that particular course. So that is something that very much so, when we are able to roll out face-to-face training, we will be doing so, and alongside colleagues within social care, so around some of the working together functions, around multi-agency meetings, they are still taking place virtually, but very much the appetite is to move back towards a face-to-face structure, because virtually you can't replace what sometimes a face-to-face meeting and training does provide. So certainly, if I hope I can give that reassurance that we will still be rolling out those forums.
Right, thanks very much, Jonathan. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Stephen, do you want to make a comment?
It was just a really quick comment, just to come back on Councillor Heptonstall's point in terms of feedback. In theory, our PACT meetings, our neighbourhood coordination groups and our neighbourhood policing team should provide that two-way flow of information. I guess I just wanted to add that I do meet regularly with Anthony Sadler and Jane and Alison that manage those arrangements. So I will take that feedback in terms of whether we've got a breakdown of communication there. So it was just to say that, David, that I will take that feedback to communities colleagues.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Stuart, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just a comment on something Jonathan said, and to welcome the focus around disruptions and that being a partnership approach, and everybody's got a part to play in that, and also the focus on perpetrators who are responsible for in the exploitation world for anything that goes on. So I think that those two things are really, really welcome and reflects comments and suggestions and recommendations from recent national reports. So it's welcome, is that?
Thank you. Can I ask some questions, please, Jonathan? With regards to the causes of death as being co-sleeping, when you obviously look in, you investigate that, or those deaths are investigated, are there any issues such as environmental factors that come into play here in terms of not having space available for those sort of arrangements? What sort of factors sort of have led this sad sort of event?
Yeah, no, certainly, David. So what we have found across those 4 cases that I alluded to within this cycle, that home environment has been a factor. That in some of the cases there has been the appropriate Moses baskets for a baby, and has been all of the equipment for baby that would be expected. Where we have then seen those tragic circumstances that have led to a child passing away, it has been where those have been present, but still co-sleeping has taken place. Likewise, it has been somewhere there hasn't been those environmental factors made available within the home as well. There has been some other factors within those deaths as well, where alcohol use has been a factor. Also, where in one of the cases where a parent had fallen asleep with a child on the sofa as well. So it's a very much a mix. There is a separate piece of work that we are looking at with health visiting services around a home environment assessment tool, which would very much then look at providing and equipping those professionals that has come from the safe sleeping standard that I mentioned within the report, to be able to identify where a family doesn't have the necessary equipment for a newborn baby. Can that then be identified, and how then can support be provided to that family? So it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of that breakdown, but certainly in a couple of the cases, those environmental factors have been present.
No, thank you for that. And obviously, I'm sure that there will be ongoing campaigns, will there, or in order to ensure these sort of things are prevented as much as they can.
There will, yeah. So that we're through the first phase of the work that the multidisciplinary team has done in terms of producing the safe sleeping standard, partnering with the Lullaby Trust to roll out training. The second phase then is around training for services that historically have been seen on the periphery when it comes to safe sleeping advice, but also around public awareness campaigns as well. So public health are taking the lead on this, which I think is the right approach. So we're developing partnerships and relationships continually with the Lullaby Trust as well. So yes, across this year, as part of our campaign cycle, safe sleeping is timetabled in.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Can I thank you, Jonathan, for your detailed report, and obviously maintain the standard of these reports for the future. So thank you very much for your time and the efforts being put into this, as well as obviously the design of the new website. So thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, shall we move on to agenda item 6, which is children affected by domestic abuse. Again, there will be a PowerPoint presentation for this. This item has been included on the agenda so that the committee might have some assurance that children who witness or are affected by domestic abuse are being supported, particularly in the light of increased domestic abuse arising from the lockdown and the pandemic. So I'd like to sort of welcome Stephen Crofts, who's the Service Director for Partnerships and Innovation, Caroline Fish, Service Manager for Early Help, and Sally Fawcett. So Stephen, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. And as you've said, what we've got to talk through is the next 20 minutes or so, 15 or 20 minutes, is a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to take part of this, supported by Sally and Caroline. Just need to bear with me a few minutes, hopefully not a few minutes, just while I get the presentation up. Just bear with me. Just need to bear with me.
No, you're doing a very good job. I wouldn't like to be doing it, I must admit, Stephen.
Just hold on. Sorry, colleagues, I'm really struggling here.
You had it. You did. We did get a view of it.
Did you?
Yeah, we did.
Stephen, I think when you get the PowerPoint on, you've got to go on to slideshow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did this yesterday. I had a practice, and now it's.
Your PowerPoint, I think, is at the bottom, isn't it? In the black.
It's the bottom right-hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now press soon view. Go to view, Stephen, across the top.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and then start slideshow. I think. Oh no, so go back up. It says slideshow.
Oh, slideshow from beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well done.
Have you all got that?
Yes, we can see that.
Right. Okay.
Yes, we've got that.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. So this is what we're hoping to talk about today. So the aspects of today's input and presentation. So I'm going to say a little bit to begin with in terms of introducing the setting the scene, setting the context in terms of children experiencing domestic abuse. We're then going to spend some time thinking about what happens at the front door, or what happens in terms of when we first receive a report of a child witnessing or experiencing domestic abuse, and what is the first response. Then going to spend a little bit of time on the sort of support and interventions that are in place, and then talk with the committee here about what are our plans, what are our next steps. So in terms of the context, in terms of the strategic responsibility and remit for domestic abuse, that sits with the Community Safety Partnership within Wakefield. They have the remit for our domestic abuse strategy and the work that we're doing to tackle domestic abuse, reduce domestic abuse, and support those that are victims or experience domestic abuse. So it sits under the community safety strategy, the strategic leadership responsibility for domestic abuse within the district. Sitting under the domestic abuse, sitting under the community safety strategy is a board called the Domestic Abuse Management Board. Multi-agency partners come together to take forward the domestic abuse strategy and the plans associated with that, and we'll say a bit more about that later and the key priorities of that strategy. I guess you mentioned it in your introduction, David, but what we've seen during lockdown is increases in domestic abuse and children experiencing domestic abuse. Also say a little bit more about what the response has been in Wakefield to that, and what that has looked like in terms of the increase. Just to hopefully you can see that, and we'll get the slides out to colleagues on the call. But a bit of the Home Office did some consultation and research last year, and this was something that they published, and it very much gives you a sense of the impact of domestic abuse on children, and gives you a sense of where our response should be. I won't necessarily repeat it line for line there, but children growing up in households where there is fear and intimidation as you'd expect, that will profoundly impact on their well-being and their development, and impact in a way that will last into adulthood. Children experiencing domestic abuse will do less well in lots of different ways, particularly in terms of emotional well-being and mental health, school and education. We do know early intervention to support children to build safe and secure and nurturing relationships with at least one individual can disrupt this damage, can help children develop resilience and enable healing to take place. So very much, again, in terms of setting the scene and context, the sort of research base that underpins our interventions. Just a quick snapshot of domestic abuse within Wakefield. This is overall domestic abuse reported incidents, not just affecting children, but we have an incident rate within Wakefield of just over 28 incidents per 1,000 of the adult population. That's slightly higher than the West Yorkshire average, and we are one of the highest incident rates within West Yorkshire. Over the last 12 months, we've seen just under 10,000 incidents of domestic abuse reported within the district, and where a child has been present, that's been in just under a quarter of those cases. Incidents are assessed, are rated in terms of the level of risk. You'll see there with 3 risk levels, with of those incidents, 7% identified as high risk, 28% as a medium risk, and a standard risk of 45%. Could you just bear with me? Someone's just rang my doorbell. Just 1 second. Sorry, I'm back. And you'll see there that we know record in 20% of cases, and something about something there in terms of recording that we need to take back. So that's some key data. I'll hand over to Sally now, and to say a little bit about the domestic abuse strategy. You heard me say earlier that was a strategy that sits under the Community Safety Partnership. So I'll hand over to you, Sally, and you'll have to tell me when you want me to move on the slide.
Right, okay, thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Sally Fawcett, I'm the Domestic Abuse Coordinator for Wakefield Council. That sits under Communities. Yeah, as Stephen said, we do have a domestic abuse strategy. It runs between 2019 and 22. There's a vision set out in the strategy that says we will not tolerate any form of domestic and sexual abuse, and partners are committed to work together to prevent it and support victims. I think it's just useful just to say, when we're talking about domestic and sexual abuse is in the context of domestic abuse. It's not wider than that. Lost my slide. Next slide, Stephen, please. Okay, the following, we've got 5 key priorities which will guide the work of the partnership. So that's of the Domestic Abuse Management Board to achieve the vision set out in the strategy. And there's 5 there that we've just highlighted to you. So the first one is really to sort of enable access to a range of support services to protect victims. So this is ensuring that we've got support services out across the district that can support victims experiencing domestic abuse. So we have the local authority run domestic abuse service. We have access to voluntary sector services like Well Women's Centre, Rose Larari Foundation. We've also got access to services that support those experiencing sexual abuse in the context of domestic abuse, and that's an organisation called CRASAC. So that just gives you an example of some of the services out there for victims. The second priority is around supporting children and young people exposed to domestic and sexual abuse. So just to give you a little bit of flavour of that, we do have specialist domestic abuse practitioners co-located in the Children's First hubs who can support families that other professionals are working with in regards to domestic abuse. I'm aware that, you know, pre-COVID, I'm not quite sure if it's still running at the moment, we've got Time to Talk programme, which runs alongside a Freedom programme, where we're working with actually the victims and then working with children as well. I'm aware there's the Who's in Charge programme again, that's tackling teen to parent domestic abuse. And we also have support from voluntary sector services such as Rosalie Ryrie. And we deliver Operation Encompass as an initiative across Wakefield District, and I'll come on to that later in this presentation. So it just gives you a little bit of a flavour of what we're doing as a partnership to tackle domestic abuse. The third priority is having a range of services to support perpetrators to prevent offending. And the vision for the partnership is that there's going to be to adopt a layered approach to perpetrators, you know, from early intervention to sort of statutory orders. So there is, I know that within the children's arena, there's relationship matters that's been rolled out across the district. So that's sort of early identification and supporting families where there may be conflict within the family. We also have Rosalie Ryrie who deliver a perpetrator group work programme for men. And there's also been an introduction of a Police and Crime Commissioner funded programme for first-time offenders, and that's called CARA. So that crosses across West Yorkshire. And then we have statutory orders that probation deliver for those offenders who were in the criminal justice system. And we've also got, for those that are in the criminal justice system, we have integrated offender management, who also have a cohort of domestic abuse perpetrators. So I think, you know, still work to do, but, you know, we've got a good start there in how we can tackle perpetrators. Number four, the fourth priority is around tackling cultural and social acceptance around domestic abuse. So lots of campaigning has been delivered as part of the strategy. We have done targeted campaigns around the effects of domestic abuse having on children. So that's the last time that was run was during the summer holidays. So that's sort of aiming at adults to say, you know, domestic abuse does have an impact on your child, so please get help. So that's been delivered. And there's a lot of training that's been offered the partnership and the workforce around raising awareness down domestic abuse, the impact on domestic abuse, coercive control, etc. Just gives you a little bit of a flavour there. The fifth priority is around understanding and responding to cultural diversity in respect of domestic and sexual abuse. Again, there's awareness raising training around, particularly around forced marriage and honour-based abuse. We're currently, as part of communities, developing some new materials around in different languages. We did have some previously, but we've revamped all the domestic abuse materials, so we're just in the process of updating that. And then we've also had some social media activity that happens around the Day of Memory in July, on the July 14th, around forced marriage. So that just gives you a flavour of that. So I think that's me, Stephen, if you want to move on.
Yep. Thanks, Sally. This next slide just picks up a little bit of detail in terms of what happens when an incident occurs, is reported, or how individuals experiencing domestic abuse can access support. MASH at the top there, the multi-agency safeguarding hub, it is the primary way that incidents of domestic abuse are reported, and again primarily in most cases by the police. There is a national police reporting requirement that incidents of domestic abuse that involve children, where children are present or known to live within the household, are reported to the safeguarding hub. So that's the primary way in which referrals are made, information is shared, and children considered. Other ways within inter-service are in terms of families or individuals self-referring to the Wakefield District Domestic Abuse Service or their local Children First hub. Other ways to receive support or to consider children experiencing domestic abuse are through meetings held within schools that are called Team Around the School meetings, take place in most schools, most terms, most half terms, and it's a place in which the school, along with partners, can consider families experiencing difficulties, including families experiencing domestic abuse. And Operation Encompass, in terms of a first response, we'll say a bit more later, but this is about a response a school can offer, a support response the school can offer the next day following an incident of domestic abuse. So a little bit there about front door and first response. The next slide takes that into a bit more detail. I'm not sure how well you can see this on your, how well this is displayed on your screens, but I'll talk through it a little bit and hopefully make some sense of it. This is 12 months worth of information and data, and this is 12 months worth of cases or incidents of domestic abuse that were reported by the police to the safeguarding hub, the MASH, at Havertop Police Station, that multi-agency team that's based at the police station. So 12 months of data here, divided into quarters. So on the left of your screen, the two columns are January to March 2020, the quarter, and then we move across to the last quarter of the calendar year last year, October to December 2020. They all, both the column that's shaded orange and the column that's shaded blue, all refer to reported incidents of domestic abuse where children were present. The blue or the orange determines what the outcome to the report has been. But just to deal initially with the overall sort of numbers here, if we look in January to March 2020, the overall number of incidents, everything combined, reported to the Safeguarding Hub, domestic abuse incidents involving children, the total there is 1,095. So just over 1,000 incidents, domestic abuse incidents between January and March 2020, where a child was present or children live within the household. If we then fast forward across to the last quarter of 2020, October to December, again, the overall number combined of incidents of domestic abuse where children were present in that 3 months increased to 1,544. So you'll see, in short and in summary, we had 1,000 incidents at the start of 2020. By the end of in a quarter, by the end of 2020, that was just over 1,500 incidents. So an increase of just over 500 incidents in a quarter over the calendar year. And if I were to give you the data for the other quarters, you would see that quarter on quarter there was an increase through 2020. In terms of what then happens once the hub has received a referral or a report of an incident, the hub and the staff there make an assessment. They look at that information in respect to the incident alongside other information that we hold that might be held in respect of the child or the family, and they make a determination as to whether it's a case that should be referred for assessment and support into either a social care team or an early help team. And that's all the on the columns, that's the part of the column that's shaded orange. They're the cases that have been referred because of the level of concern, when we looked at when the incident is considered, when the family circumstances are considered, whether other information is considered. They're the cases that have been referred into social care or early help for assessment and support. Those highlighted blue are cases that have not been referred into those safeguarding systems, but are cases that, after consideration of the incident and the level of risk, after consideration of other support that may be being provided to the family, that their cases that are recorded at that level as a contact, and not referred for further, not referred further into social care or early help. They're cases where it's considered the risk is such and the support arrangements for the family of such that they can be managed without escalation and further referral. So that's a little bit about the front door. You'll see in summary increases in incidents involving children, which reflects what we picked up in terms of what's been happening in terms of overall prevalence of domestic abuse during the period of lockdown, what's been reported nationally and locally in terms of increases in domestic abuse during periods of lockdown and the associated pressure on households and families. In terms of referrals into social care and early help for assessment and support, the numbers have pretty much remained stable. So whilst overall incidents have reported, the numbers referred into social care where they may then become a child protection plan or early help and an early help plan, the numbers have remained fairly stable each quarter at just over 500 referrals into service. Okay, the next slide is a little bit more about Operation Encompass and what happens following the report of an incident to the police through this operation. So again, Sally, do you want to pick this one up?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of give you just sort of little context around Operation Encompass for Wakefield. So we started this initiative across Wakefield District in around April 2018. We did a rollout of Operation Encompass and trained primary and secondary schools. Over 140 schools are now signed up to receiving Operation Encompass notifications. And the notifications are particularly around 4 to 16-year-olds who are in school, where they are present at a domestic incident that happened the night before. So what happens, every morning we'll get information from the police which notifies of what children were present at a domestic incident the night before, and we will send them notifications to the schools that morning before the school day starts, so they can really make sure the next day better is there for the children attending school. So it's just around sort of making sure they're fine in school. It's not superseding any safeguarding procedures. It's just around to make sure that child's better. For example, they may not have arrived with a school tie, for example. So if they're aware that there's been a domestic incident, they won't sort of send them home or sort of give them detention or anything. They'll just make sure they've got a tie, for example. So what they also do, the school, is obviously, as I've just mentioned, they will give some support and some advice. So we've trained the schools and we've talked about what sort of response they would probably do if they got this notification. So we talked around about giving some silent or overt support. So sometimes schools may not need to do anything, but then because they've got other information in school, may need to do something as well. And they're fully aware of all the local services for support for them if they need to give them any additional support and around that information that's been shared. There's also a national telephone service and helpline. So this is part of a national offer, and along with there's an Operation Encompass website nationally as well. So it's just another option for schools to be able to tap into. Again, the schools can tap into the team around school and early years. So as Stephen spoke to you earlier, it's a meeting that schools can take cases of concern to a multi-agency meeting for discussion. At the moment, Operation Encompass is only being delivered to those children who are present at an incident, but we know there's a lot of children who are also living in domestic abuse that aren't particularly present when an incident happens. So they may have been at grandparents, for example. So we've been lucky to secure some additional funding from the Community Safety Partnership to sort of expand and widen the remit of Operation Encompass. So we're just in the process of recruiting someone to be able to extend it out to those children who were not present but do live in households. So we're not missing anybody and nobody's getting fallen through the net. Just also in regards to Operation Encompass, we're working with our colleagues across West Yorkshire around cross-border notifications, because there's a small number of children who attend schools out of Wakefield district and vice versa, in a process in place for that. So again, we're not missing a small number of children where we can. And we're also sort of trying to sort of explore options around how we can roll out Operation Compass for early years, but that's just something that's just starting to be considered. So that's Operation Encompass. And I think the next slide, what Stephen will show you, is just a sort of flyer in regards to sort of the national Operation Encompass information.
Thanks, Sally. The next slide, support and interventions. This deals with, just going back to the what happens at the front door at the safeguarding hub. We've heard that about 500 children's cases a quarter are referred into either children's social care or early help teams. This slide here picks up some of the support and interventions that then you would expect those children and families to pick up on. And if I invite Caroline Fish to just tell us a bit more about what some of these interventions mean in practice.
Hi, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Service Manager for Early Help, so I have responsibility for the Children's Centres and the Children First Hub, and we also have an Early Help team up at the MASH. So of those families that require additional support that go through for a referral, they'll either come to a Children First Hub and be allocated a practitioner, or they'll go to Children's Social Care. What the data that Stephen showed you previously doesn't tell you is that there is movement between those two areas of the service as well. So where we feel that the needs can't be managed within Early Help, we have a step-up process for it to go to Children's Social Care. Likewise, where an assessment's may be taking place from Children's Social Care, and actually what they need is a programme of intervention and support, there is a step-down process which comes through to Children First Hubs. So what we would do if it comes through a referral is anything that comes through to either Children's Social Care or Children's First Hubs has an assessment, whether that's a single assessment or an early help assessment, just to understand the need and to make sure that the interventions and the support put in place is the right one. Within that, we'll also identify any safety planning that may need to take place to identify and mitigate any ongoing risk, and also what could or what might or might not happen should that safety plan not work. We'll also work with the family and with partner agencies to look at accessing relevant support that might need specialist support potentially that might need to be put into place for those families. So that could be housing, it could be mental health, it could be linking in with WADAS. So anything that might need to be put in place there. Within the Children First Hub, we deliver the Freedom Programme. The joy of coming later on in the presentation is a lot of what you were going to say has already been said, so I'll try not to repeat things too much, but we do deliver the Freedom Programme for victims of domestic abuse alongside the Well Women's Centre. And running alongside that, we have the Time to Talk programme, which is for children who've experienced domestic abuse, who have experienced domestic abuse who are under 5. At the moment, that isn't running because we have run some Freedom face-to-face over the COVID period, and we are delivering online as well. We don't have the facility to be able to safely run the Time to Talk programme at the moment, and it just doesn't work online with under 5s with the nature of the programme. But that is still very much on the cards for running again once we can do that. I think Sally's already mentioned that we have a domestic abuse practitioner based within the Children First Hubs that we can work with for support, for advice, for guidance of where we go next in regards to support, and children's social care will also use those practitioners for advice as well. We have a range of support that we offer to children who've been the victims or experienced domestic abuse. As well as the Time to Talk programme, we also do direct work with children and young people. This can involve wishes and feelings work. It can involve managing some of their emotions around this. We very much take a sort of trauma-informed practice approach on how we manage the work that we do. There's also group work that we deliver. Some of it is specifically around domestic abuse, but some of it is more general. So we also run wellbeing groups and nurture groups to sort of work with young people to help them to move forward. We also have really strong links with mental health services, whether that's through Future in Mind or with COOF, so that we can signpost or support young people to access that. Sally's already talked about the Who's in Charge programme that we've been jointly delivering with youth services around teen to parent violence. So we've continued delivering that over the COVID period. That has been taking place face to face because that's the best way to deliver that group work. And there's also the Relationship Matters that Sally also referred to, which is around parental conflict. So not at the point of domestic abuse, but just to understand those relationships and that impact that it can have on children. We've already talked a little bit about the team around the school and team around the early years model. We also, from the Children First Hubs, have a link practitioner for every school, and we have a universal early help practitioner who provides support for early years at the moment. So where a referral doesn't end up, where we get a contact that doesn't end up in a referral, it may be that universal services manage that, but we can offer some support for them to be able to do that. To ensure that they feel confident and able to be able to continue to support that family. In terms of the voluntary and community sector, I think Sally's mentioned a lot of the people that we work with. There is support available from the VCS, and we do tap into that in order to access provision that maybe we don't have the facilities to provide within the Children First Hubs and Children's Social Care. So I think Sally's already mentioned Rosalie Ryrie, and there's iSpace and Penny Appeal and various other organisations that we work with. We also, when contacts are made at MASH, they're rated as high, medium or low risk. The high risk domestic abuse referrals and also those that become high risk during the course of our work can be referred to what we call the MARAC, which is the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, which is for those that we consider to be of such a high level of risk that we really need to look at what that multi-agency support needs to be to keep the victim and the family safe in those circumstances. So I think there's quite a lot of work that happens. As Stephen's already mentioned, the number of referrals has gone up somewhat, and it's just about for us it's how we continue to support those families and expand what the offer might be to offer that support. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. The next slide here deals with workforce development and the work that's underway to ensure that the workforce across the children's system, across schools, early years settings, early help, voluntary community sector are all have the skills and confidence to support families experiencing domestic abuse. The main message here is that the training program is multi-agency, that it's about very much the children's workforce training together to build the skills and confidence to support families experiencing domestic abuse. And in Sally's part of the world, the domestic abuse service, she's got staff that are delivering a range of training to colleagues. The other offer that we've got to support the workforce is very much through staff care, supervision, support and debrief, and making sure that those staff that are supporting families experiencing domestic abuse have the right debrief and support for the work that they do. So a little bit about workforce development there. The main message is it's about training staff colleagues together across the children's sector. And then lastly, again, we've touched on some of this through what we've said earlier, but this is the last slide and highlights some of the things that we're focused on improving over the coming period. Sally's mentioned already perpetrator programs, work to prevent perpetrators reoffending. Again, we have provision in place. We're very much looking to strengthen that provision, and Sally mentioned in particular some new support and programs being funded through the West Yorkshire Police Crime Commissioner to really strengthen work in this area. You heard Sally talk about one of the priorities of the domestic abuse strategy was to support children that are experiencing domestic abuse, and I think where we consider that support is most needed is earlier interventions and support. You will have seen through the data that there's a number of incidents, low-level incidents of domestic abuse that the services there to support are largely through universal services, and it's whether we need to try and develop and strengthen those earlier lower level interventions for lower risk where there is where concerns are of a lower risk. And that's something that we would want through the safeguarding partnership, the work that Jonathan talked about earlier and coordinates, and the work of the community safety partnership, the domestic abuse management board, very much about really strengthening, taking a joint approach in our responses and support and services to families experiencing domestic abuse, and again that focus on earlier interventions. Not said a lot about this, but new domestic abuse legislation comes into force over the course of this year, and again how that's implemented will very much be the remit of the domestic abuse management boards. It does place new responsibilities on local authorities to support victims of domestic abuse in particular. So that's the input, colleagues, and I'm happy for any questions, comments that either myself, Sally, or Caroline can answer. I shall try and stop presenting the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you very much, Sally, for a very detailed presentation. And we would obviously welcome it being forwarded to us, particularly I think the poster advertising the Encompass contact details. I think that would be very important, particularly for elected members to be able to get out onto their Facebook pages and social media. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Cynthia, you had a question to ask.
Yes, thank you, David. Stephen, earlier in the presentation, you quoted the different levels of risk. Do these levels of risk relate to specific behaviours, or do they relate to the areas of concern in all areas?
The risk that I spoke about is the risk that is assigned to an incident of domestic abuse. So, and Sally can perhaps help me out here, but yeah. I think it's primarily the police response officers that consider an incident and assign a risk level to that domestic abuse incident. So it will be based on the incident, the behaviours at that incident, whether it was lower level verbal altercations and threats, or whether it was much more serious physical assault. Sally, do you want to add?
You know, it's a tool the police use to sort of like assess risk, and it's called the DAT risk assessment. So it's a risk indicator tool. There'll be a range of questions that will be asked of the victim, and that will sort of determine the level of risk, and that's how they ascertain whether it's high risk, low, or standard or medium.
Could I just add to that? Yeah, that's the risk that comes in at MASH, but once it comes to MASH, we actually reconsider the risk in regards to the children. The original risk evaluation comes in from the police around the risk of the incident, but then we'll look at it to see whether the impact on the children may be lesser or greater. What we also do is we will look at how many notifications we've received. So if we've had a number of standard risk notifications, we may elevate that to a medium risk because of the ongoing nature of that. And we have done quite a lot of work with the police as well, so they are now starting to factor that more into their risk assessment process as well.
Thank you very much for that.
Stephen, there's a button. Yeah.
Oops, sorry, it's me. Stephen, sorry, can I? Stephen, can I ask a question? Is the 9,533 across the district? Are they spread, or are they in clusters?
Sorry, David. The
9,533 cases. Are
sorry,
they spread?
Yeah, they are spread across the district. That is a global district figure.
I can't remember exactly where they are, but we do have pockets where we experience a higher number of referrals across the district. I know that particularly the central area of the district, we do receive more domestic abuse notifications for that particular area. Just talking off the top of my head, I think we may get slightly more for Castleford as well, but I'd have to double check, but we can get those figures to you.
Thanks a lot, Caroline.
Certainly the data report that goes through to the Domestic Abuse Management Board does detail how those 9,000 break down by area. That's, you know, some of the. I'm just looking at some of the data now. As Caroline said, Wakefield Central is one of the highest, followed by Pontefract and Nottingley and Normanton and Featherstone as some of the highest areas of the district for domestic abuse.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be useful if we were able to see those figures. Thank you very much for that. Andy, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, with such a thing like this, and the figures about 10,000 you mentioned, human costs, but there's also financial costs as well, in terms of health and criminal justice, etc. My question is, do you have sufficient funding and also staffing resources to enable you to provide the highest quality support and intervention to meet the priority needs? And if you do, I wonder if you could give us an indication of what sort of budget is being worked on for this.
The 10,000 incidents is 10,000 incidents overall within the Wakefield district, of which around a quarter involve children being present. I mean, I guess that's a really big question in terms of have we got the right resources to respond to those 10,000 incidents. It cuts across police, and it cuts across support services such as social care. Services are pressured, and it's very difficult for me to be able to quantify across that range of partnership responses whether that resource in terms of the the value or whether it's right or not. I think what I do know from a children's perspective is that we do feel that being able to respond, being able to do more at earlier stages of lower levels of domestic abuse incidents is possibly where we've got a gap in our service.
Steve, if I could just add in as well, in regards to the domestic abuse service that's run locally, there has been some substantial investment over this last year so we can meet demands to referrals that come in for victims, and the domestic abuse service is currently going through a restructure, so we are meeting capacity at the moment in regards to referrals made to the domestic abuse service.
The reason, if I may, the reason for asking, the only figure I've got is for Portsmouth, and how comparable that is for Wakefield, I have no idea. But where they sort of identified this specific, they quantified the costs for health and criminal justice, police, and children's social care, for example. And it just gives an indication as to whether this is a massive problem, obviously, and it's not only human cost but the financial cost. And it's just really just to see if there's any way of seeing that we're sufficiently resourcing this aspect of provision that needs to be done within the district. And it was just a question to see if we can get a handle on that. I know it's difficult to actually break it down because of the different services involved, but I think it's a valid question nevertheless.
Thank you for that, Andy. Can we move on to Kathy, please?
Yeah, I've got two, I think, probably simple questions. Firstly, I'm just wondering what general advice and information is out for the general public that might sort of suspect something's happening in a household and be concerned. And secondly, I think you've partially answered this other question, is, how long, there's lots of support out there, and I just wondered what the time lapse is between a family maybe, sort of experiencing domestic abuse and actually been able to be supported by some of the organisations that you've got out there. And I think you said that you're keeping up with the demand, but is that true with the support that's out there as well?
In terms of, I guess, some of the response times, the cases that find their way to the safeguarding hub and considered as part of children's services and safeguarding, we know that Operation Encompass, as we've heard, is about the next day and a response the next day. So that is something that really does happen quite swiftly. We do know that when a case is considered by the MASH, we are looking for those sort of responses to be, or for the service to be identified within sort of 24 hours, particularly if that's going into a social care referral and assessment, or an early help referral or assessment. It becomes more problematic, possibly, for that group that don't meet the threshold for referral into those services. Sally, I'm not sure what the sort of turnaround time are in terms of referrals into WADAS and receiving support through a domestic abuse practitioner.
Yeah, in regards to sort of if victims are referred into WADAS, so this is the adults 16 plus, they should get a response this same day within 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on level of risk.
If I can just respond from an early help MASH point of view, all of those that we triage through the early help MASH, contact is made, assuming we have relevant contact details, but contact is made over the phone with the victim or the parent, depending on the circumstances. And it's not just a triage process within early help MASH. Yes, there is triage, but actually it's a practitioner who's on the phone who will immediately start to offer advice, support, and if something is needed urgently, it will go straight through to the duty team to pick up.
Mm-hmm. And I think similar in the domestic abuse service, there's a helpline, so they'd get immediate advice and support if somebody rang up, whether they're self-referrals or professionals.
Yeah.
Celia, your question, please.
Yeah, I think thanks for this presentation. It's very useful indeed. I just wanted to say I think it's quite depressing that we've still got this pervasive level of domestic abuse going on. But my specific question really is in relation to the take-up of the Freedom Programme, and briefly, if possible, what it actually covers, but also possibly more specifically, what in practice can be offered to children in an ongoing way that offers them support, given that they are living in, fearful and intimidating environments. Thank you.
Where they come through for allocation to a worker, the support is ongoing for children and families. We will work with families for a period of months, however long is needed, and we'll continuously assess as we go. There's an open referral with an allocated worker. That work takes place as part of that process. Sally might be able to help you out a little bit more with the content of the Freedom Programme, but we deliver that alongside Well Women. In reality, we could probably deliver double the amount that we do, but we also within that Freedom Programme we have a really good a retention rate of the people that attend, so they tend to see the programme through, or if there's an issue and they can't, they'll come back as well. So we do have a really good uptake of that. In terms of those the children and young people who don't have an allocated worker, we are looking at how we can deliver the time to talk, which I mentioned we're not currently doing at the moment because of COVID restrictions. But what we will do is we will work with universal services, be that schools or health visiting teams or voluntary community sector, to enable them to support the family on an ongoing basis, which links in with the work of Operation Encompass, just to be able to kind of keep track of them to make sure that things are going okay, and that on a day-to-day level life is okay for them. Like I said, Sally might be able to update you a little bit more on the Freedom Programme. I've never actually delivered this, but my understanding is there's very much around the impact of the domestic abuse, but also one of the aims is to prevent it's at the moment it's delivered to women, but to prevent women from seeking out another abusive relationship. So there's work done around self-esteem, around well-being, and around aspirations. So Sally, you might be able to expand.
I think you've sort of covered it quite well, Caroline, but it's a 12-week programme, and again it's sessions that are actually around recognising signs of domestic abuse, so people do not go back into another relationship of abuse. There's also a module in there around the impact on children as well. So yeah, it's a well recognised programme for victims across the country.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. And the last question, Stuart. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First, picking up further on from what Andy and Celia said, just about the volume and just the comment around, if we've got the high volume, it's not just about the resource to respond, it's about interventions, awareness, education, isn't it, to reduce that number overall and balancing that. And I know it's a difficult thing on resources, that to balance that and responding to what we need to do, but also educating so people don't get in this situation and we don't have these incidents in the first place. So that's a comment. The other one is also on something that Stephen said about the importance of early intervention, identification at, and I'll use this phrase carefully, low-level domestic abuse incidents where children are involved, so they can put the right things in place. I'm just wondering about how that sits at odds with what we heard from the Children Improvement Programme report, which talks about high volumes and occasionally poor quality referrals into the MASH, and some partners who do not understand the threshold for access to children's social care. And those two things seem to be at odds, because I'm just wondering how them referrals get through. They may not reach the Section 47 level, but how we're doing that to get that early intervention when it hasn't reached that level of social care. The two things just a little bit at odds to me.
I think in terms of, if I picked up the question right, Stuart, in terms of, you're right to say there seems to be a high number of referrals to the safeguarding hub that don't result in meeting a threshold for then assessment or support through children's social care or early help. I think where we're at in terms of discussions with the police is that the police take the view that operating within national reporting guidance in respect of domestic abuse incidents involving children, that they are mandated and are required to report every incident. And again, using the language carefully, even if they are really fairly low incidents. of concern. It is a police view that that every incident involving a child, however serious, must be mandated to report that to the safeguarding hub, and then that hub is required to consider the circumstances. It is something that has been picked up at a leadership level between directors of children's services within West Yorkshire and assistant chief constables. It's an ongoing debate as to whether there is something different we could do that didn't that was about an earlier and better response rather than a referral to a safeguarding that is simply recorded as a contact with. So yeah, I share that. I share your interpretation. If I've answered that right, it's something that we're talking to the police about at a senior level. It is something that you would think a better, earlier, more targeted response that didn't result in a referral to the safeguarded hub would be more suitable.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And just to follow on from that, and conscious of time, Chair, I do understand that, and that there is some bit of differences around policy, procedures, etc. Yeah. And now this fits in the inspections. But it was just to pick on your comment that it's important to identify those children who are involved in again, carefully worded, low-level incidents and start some early interventions. And it's just what that pathway is. If it isn't through the MASH. Because that is the early intervention, that is prevention of serious escalation that we need to address. And I know it has been looked at, but I think just to reaffirm that we can't talk in that language. It's important, but then have the two-tier system, if you like.
Yeah. Can I just come in there? I'm just thinking. I don't know if it answers part of that question, but I think we do have Operation Encompass. So all the domestic incidents that are reported to MASH or into social care are also notified to Operation Encompass. So, and most of them are low level. That might not meet the thresholds for social care, but schools are aware of that. We're making schools aware of that instance. So, that immediate support for that child should be put into place with, the next day.
Yeah, I think you're right. So that's really important, but that only applies to children who are at school. So the ones that aren't, the ones who are in nursery, ones at home school, they don't capture them at all.
No, it doesn't just do it, and I think that's what we said earlier. We're going to sort of try to explore. I mean, we've started to explore nurseries, but there's hundreds of nurseries, so I think we're going to sort of look at early years and see if we can sort of progress that going forward.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation, all of you, and thank you for the questions. Right, we're running slightly behind time, so can I ask that we're back at 11:45, please? 11:45. Right, so if you want to stop the recording, please, James, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. Are we live? Right, thanks a lot, James. Right, welcome back, everybody. Agenda item 7, which is children's voice and participation, which is you'll find on agenda pages 43 to 55. The recent Ofsted inspection recognised the authority's commitment to enabling children and young people to participate and to be involved in driving service improvements, and that young people involved felt that they were being listened to. I'd like to welcome Eamon Mohans, who is the Service Manager for Youth Offending Team and Youth Services, and Elaine Armstrong, who is the voice and influence of the Child Coordinator. To present the reports, and Elaine's going to give a PowerPoint presentation explaining how children's voices are being heard. So I'll just allow a few moments for Elaine to share her screen with everyone. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry, I'm just having difficulty setting up to present my screen.
It's not the easiest thing to do, and I don't envy you the task.
You wouldn't believe I've just been delivering training and presenting from this screen, but it's not doing as I'd like. It's not. I'm not giving me the option to share my screen.
James, is there any help, any guidance?
You'll have to tell me when to move on.
I will do. So thank you for inviting me along to give you a little bit of a snapshot of Wakefield Youth Voice activity within the district. Presentation. Thank you. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Stephen. So during today's presentation, I'm hoping to give you that whistle stop of what's happening. So we're looking at the Youth Services Youth Voice team, the Youth Steering Group, our groups that we deliver with our young people, the Children and Young Partnership Board connections, and our work with the Safeguarding Partnership. A brief outline of our Build Our Future Summit, which I believe you've received the summit summary.
Yes, we have.
Thank you. I'll work on the rollout of the Mind of My Own app, youth voice and influence activities in a summary, and give you opportunity to ask questions towards the end, if that's okay. Next slide, please, Stephen. So within the Youth Voice team, there are 5 of us. There is myself, who you've just been introduced to. I've got Richard Stanley, who's our participation worker, whose key focus is children in care and care leavers and supporting them. We have Sugra Ashraf, who's citizenship lead practitioner, and she takes the lead on the UK Youth Parliament. And we have Chloe Wilkes, who's our administrator, and Danielle Wallace, who's a youth support worker, and both Chloe and Danielle linking with all of our groups that we deliver. Next slide, please, Stephen. So the Youth Steering Group, we've just revisited to ensure that we have all representation from across services partners and the VCSE groups, and to have young people represented on the steering group. The steering group is responsible for understanding the most important issues for young people. So whatever our young people are feeding back, we make sure that information is shared across the district, and that work is prioritised to these. We provide feedback from their services to ensure that young people are being supported and are heard across the different services, and also to celebrate and not replicate any of the work that's already going on out there, and we can link pieces of work together. Share idea projects and speaking to young people to collect experiences and views, and to help monitor and evaluate Wakefield Youth Voice, identifying the next steps for us, and support partners to ensure that children are listened to and their voices are central to their work. So we share any tools or any key resources that we have, any of the regional information that we have access to, and linking wherever possible to support youth voice and strengthen it. Okay, Stephen. So the groups that are our foremost groups at the moment are our Children in Care Council, which Richard takes the lead on. And within the Children in Care Council, we have both children in care and care leavers represented. And they do have a section within the Corporate Parenting Committee on a regular basis where our young people take over and talk about their priorities. We have the UK Youth Council, and they meet every week to discuss the key priorities for themselves. Their priorities link very much with our Build Our Futures priorities, which I will be discussing shortly. We have our improvement group, which have been the driving force on revisiting some of the documentation and some of the services delivered within children's services, and have been part of the mystery shopper activities. We have Next Steps and Care Leavers, which is a post-16 forum where our young people preparing to leave care meet and discuss issues that are pertinent to them, and talk about the options that are open to them. And we have the Emotional Wellbeing Group and our Anti-Bullying Group, which are two separate groups. The Emotional Wellbeing Group have been working on a timeline of intervention for young people, and are keen to ensure that there is appropriate services available at any stage of a young person's life and for their needs. And they did a lot of work around the WFI CAN website. The Anti-Bullying Group are focusing on resources and an anti-bullying policy to support young people who are being affected by bullying, and they're really keen that it's not just about the young person that's experienced bullying, it's about their peers, but also about the young person that's been brought into bullying and found themselves bullying someone, and then ensuring that they get support as well. Over the last few months, we've established a Young Carers Youth Forum. So they meet every 4 weeks to discuss issues for young carers, things that they feel particularly passionate about, and to follow up on the promise that was made to them. And we've now had our third session of the Youth Offending Team Youth Forum. And the young people in that group are now working on updating the information that's available to them in the reception area. So it's quite low level at the minute, but we're working on having a member then join the Build Our Futures group. And our youth work team are absolutely fabulous with their detached groups at collecting youth voice and feeding back into us what's happening for them. And we've had quite a few members come from the detached work as well. And Build Our Futures Forum is the key forum that overarches all of these groups. So the information collated within all of the groups that are active at the moment feed into Build Our Futures and identify our next steps. Okay, Stephen. We've been really successful in the past year in having a young person become a permanent member of the board. And he's attended every meeting so far. He was integral in presenting the information about digital poverty recently, which no doubt you will have heard about WF Connect now and how quickly that programme has been developed. The young man that is on the board presented with a colleague the priorities that young people had identified and came up with some solutions which now all appear to have been implemented, which he's absolutely over the moon about. Our young person is responsible for ensuring that the actions taken by the board are following with the Children and Young People's Plan and the Promise document, and he holds everybody to account. He's quite astute and holds me to account, if I'm quite honest. Our next steps with the board is to have members support each of the priorities that were identified at the BOF Summit. Our second priority is to secure a second young person as member of the board, and we do have someone that our existing member is trying to train up. He needs that extra support in there, and we're hoping to have a Youth Voice takeover event where we're hoping to take over the board and lead the agenda on that particular day. Okay, Stephen. We've worked with the Safeguarding Partnership manager, and he's represented on our steering group. Our young people attended the Safeguarding Partnership executive meeting last year and presented their anti-bullying video. And they, as I've previously explained, they're working on the policy now, and I asked for some support in working with schools at that board. We have care experienced young people that are delivering challenging stereotypes as part of Safeguarding Week, and that training has now escalated, that it's now being brought in as part of mandatory training across the service. And we continue to work in partnership to develop young people-led training and resources. Okay, Stephen. So in November last year, we ran our first virtual BOF Summit. Previously, the BOF Summit had run face-to-face with around 200 young people in one venue. This time, given the circumstances, we had to change our plans quite quickly and delivered virtually. But to ensure that happened, we did lots of groundwork using our contacts across the district who were working face-to-face with young people to collate feedback on what young people were actually saying out there. What were their worries? What were their key concerns? What did they want to happen? What did they want to change? We made it a celebration of youth participation and engagement throughout the challenges of 2020. And working on virtual platforms for me was the biggest challenge. I've had lots of training now from our young people, so that was celebrated. We heard the views from children across the district, and we identified what matters most to them. The Build Our Futures created a summit action plan, and we're still working to develop that further. And we welcomed 10 new members, and this week we've added an extra two more of the young people that were at the event have actually now joined our forum and are working with us on our priorities. Okay, Stephen. So as I said, I've been delivering training this morning on Mind of My Own. The Mind of My Own app was launched July last year, and we've now trained, I think it's just over 200 members of staff. We've trained 40 this week. The Mind of My Own app allows young people to express their views and opinions on a virtual platform. However, the statements that are created from these can be printed off and attached to case files, and we request that the social worker or person working with that young person responds to those statements within a 48-hour working period. And what we're trying to do is, when a statement has come through, is that the person that's supporting that young person acknowledges that the statement they've made and identifies what work they've undertaken to support the concerns that come through, or even the young person sharing their good news, which does tend to come through as well. So as of Friday last week, we had 183 worker accounts. So that's 183 staff across children's services that had set up their own accounts, and we'd had 50 statements received in total, and we've got 45 young people accounts set up. We're hoping to extend on that this week with having a further 40 staff trained, and as of tomorrow we have our first champion session running, and we'll be having a practice forums and further training sessions rolling along with those. Okay, Stephen. So as part of our voice and influence activities over the past year, we've had our young people attend the Corporate Parenting Committee, as I was saying, and raise their concerns and their priorities. We had a group of 7 of our young people meet with a Ofsted inspector during the recent visit. and that was a complete mix of young people. So we had care experienced young people, young carers, young people that are part of all of our groups, and some that are recently joined, so that we could demonstrate across the board that young people are being better represented, and that within Wakefield. We have staff training, so we have, as I said, the challenging stereotypes training. We have care experienced young people delivering the designated teacher training and participation and voices. They've also been delivering the Mockingbird training and the preparation for foster care. And they've, as part of that training for foster carers, they also make assessments on the foster carers taking part in the session. They've been involved in the recruitment of a number of staff and foster carers, and all the young people prior to engaging in recruitment are given support and training to help them understand the process, and they are involved in the discussions post-interview to ensure that we get some of the best candidates to support them. We've developed an internal accreditation scheme for young people participating in Youth Voice, and this encompasses the number of hours that they've committed, but also identifies some of the employability skills that they've been working towards. We're involved in the progression of the youth hubs, and we've set up a youth hub youth group who are helping to steer the plans for these. Our young people were involved in WF Connect, as I've explained, with our Children and Young People Partnership Board member raising digital poverty at the board. And they've developed the Care for Us and the WF ICANN websites. The Care for Us website, we've had some really interesting access on there. Our young people were actually involved in the development of the whole of that site, and it breaks it down into the different age groups of young people accessing it and the support that's available to them. And we've had feedback that at least 2 of the young men that we've been working with had actually used the site, and as care leavers had got a better understanding of what they're entitled to and what support they could access. But we also had a young person who'd become homeless. He was a care leaver, he'd become homeless, he'd moved to London and was quite isolated. He'd accessed the site, and we've been able to get him support and bring him back into the system to ensure that he's effectively supported, so he's in a much better place now. And as of the 22nd of January this year, from the 1st, there were 104 separate users for that site, and it is getting well used. Okay, Stephen. So what matters most to our young people? These are the priorities that came out of the Build Our Future Summit, and the information that we used to establish these priorities came from 3 questions that were asked across the district. It was put out to all VCSE groups. It was sent out and asked by our youth work team detached practitioners, and it was asked in a lot of the groups that are running across the district. And the 3 questions were: what do you like about where you live? What don't you like, and what would make it better? And we went on to ask how COVID has affected them and their families, and if they had a question that they could ask a panel of VIPs from the council, what would they ask? And these were the 8 priorities that came forward, and these are now the ranking order of them. We've done some activities recently to see which they most prioritised, and emotional wellbeing came out far and above anything else. So we have emotional wellbeing, the support for young carers, climate change, COVID-19 recovery, bullying, things to do and places to go, digital poverty and transport. Okay, Stephen. So as previously discussed, Ofsted inspectors did meet with some of our young people, and these were the statements that were given by Ofsted in the report that came back. The local authority are committed to the participation. That means young people are encouraged and supported to play a part, and their input has made and continues to make a difference. Okay, next slide, please. So we have got lots happening. We've tried our best over the whole of the pandemic period to make sure that all our young people are effectively supported. and are engaging in different activities. So we set up lots of groups that they could access on a weekly basis, but we've now have virtual platforms for everybody. It's also enabled us to continue having input from some of our young people that moved on to university this year. We'll be retaining our virtual presence as well as our face-to-face meetings when we can meet back up, to ensure that young people that are not living in Wakefield but are Wakefield residents can still have their say and can participate where they feel comfortable to. Over the next year, we're hoping to engage with even more young people. As I say, we now have 12 more recruits to our BOF forum, and we are looking to build on that, and we're linking up wider with the VCSE groups, the Children First hubs, and other services that are working with young people. We're hoping to have more staff become Youth Voice champions. We've just asked for champions to support with the Mind of My Own rollout, and to express the extent of the resources that are available and how effective the use of that tool is in gathering youth voice. We're also planning our youth summit for 2021, and we're planning that for all tier levels, including lockdown, and we will deliver, even if it's virtual and we're all delivering from home, because we really identify how much our young people got out of the last summit and how important it is that we do keep revisiting the priorities that they've identified and the work we've done towards them. And we're planning the Children in Care Awards for this year. I believe we now have 190 young people that are in care that have been nominated for awards this year. So it's really important for us that they do get celebrated. Okay, Stephen. And now any questions from you?
Thank you very much for that presentation, Elaine. It was very motivating, and having sort of listened in on the conference in November, it's very much the case of children no longer seen and not heard. So I think very much appreciated for that. Any questions from anybody? Andy, over to you.
Thank you. That was an absolutely terrific presentation. Thank you for that. It was so optimistic and positive, and well done. Thank you. The questions. You're describing a very positive setup at the moment, but how effectively and successful are you communicating with all the groups of young people across the district? And I wondered if there are any geographical areas or demographic groups that are currently underrepresented. I know you've got a wide reach, but are there any gaps?
We do have gaps. When I first came into post last January, what I've been doing is try my best to engage young people from across the district. One area that was particularly weak was the southeast of the district, and we now have, I think we have 3 members from that side of the district now. I'm hoping in the next few months to link up further with the Children First hubs, and have more young people based around the clusters engage with us. I think with some of the interventions that are running in the Children First hubs, if I can join in with some of their activities, we can sort of establish forums across the district, and I think having those forums across the district will allow for more localised priorities to come forward, and us to look at the best way we can support young people in that area.
It's Eamon as the service manager. Can I support Elaine with some of these questions, if I may? Just to add there on, making sure that we are reaching across to capture all areas and all needs. Within the steering groups, number of steering groups that we have, within the discussions and the dialogue is where are the gaps. And I know certainly around the Mind of My Own, within some of the data, etc. We're looking at kind of interrogating some of that a bit deeper to look at, who we are connecting with and where is missing, the silent ones that are in difficulties at the moment. How are we working to engage them? I think it's very clear within our strategy that we will be looking deeply into where the gaps are and how we can broker some of that. Thank you.
Absolutely terrific. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and your report, and obviously please keep up the good work, because I know the young people do appreciate it from what I've heard and obviously in my conversations. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
everybody. Agenda item number 8, Executive Leaders Forward Plan for Key Decisions. Our role is to hold the decision makers to account by reviewing the Leaders Forward Plan and having input into decisions before they're taken. Of the 3 key decisions listed on agenda page 57, one was agreed by Cabinet earlier this month, which was the integrated leadership to strengthen our Wakefield Together vision, which obviously we've had reported on. The remaining 2 decisions due to be taken are the capital maintenance roof replacement scheme update and the transformation of residential children's homes. Are there any comments or questions from anybody? Kevin, over to you.
I'm just struck by the one that's talking about re-roofing Sandal Magna Primary. Now, that school's only about 10 years old, might be a little bit more, but not much. And on a non-urgent basis, it would actually be good to have at least a short report that actually said, how did we actually come to be in the business of doing a complete re-roofing on a school that's about, as I say, might be 12, 15, but really pretty recent. So something's gone badly wrong there. Now, I know that this is one of these schools that was putting itself in for kind of design awards and so forth, you know, innovative appearance and the rest of it. But it's not much use getting design awards if you end up having to kind of replace the roof at considerable expense. So it was just a request at some point, you know, I don't mind, sometime in the next 6 months, doesn't really want to displace other things, of just a short explanation of how come, roughly speaking, a 10-year-old roof ends up having to be expensively repaid, and be interesting to know who's paying for it. I suspect we are. Okay,
Right,
thanks, Chair.
Right, thanks, Kevin. I'm sure Elaine can follow up on that one, please, if you can. Are there any other comments? Carl?
Hiya, can you hear me?
Yes, Carl, over to you.
I mean, I think it's the developers. I think there's been a fault with the school building, so they had to move all the children into mobile classrooms. So I am aware of this issue, and I've been chasing it up with Rob Smith, actually.
Yeah. Right, thanks a lot, Carl. Much appreciated. But I think obviously we will get a follow-up report on it. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, right. Well, thank you very much for this extra meeting. I hate to say this now to everybody, but the next meeting is 1 week from today at 10 AM and will be, of course, held remotely. So thank you everyone for your attendance and questions and comments that have been made on this extra meeting. So thank you very much and goodbye. And if we can have the cameras turned off, please, James, we'd be ever so grateful.
Thank you.